Various claims aired in Parliament recently about a cash for cruelty scandal involving Animals Australia. Rick Wilson MP, he's the member for O'Connor in Western Australia, and Senator Slade Brockman, a Western Australian senator, both gave speeches urging the Federal Agricultural Minister Murray Watt to cut ties with the extremist organisation. And Animals Australia have now been revealed as paying $148,000 to a deckhand on board a live export ship. And that deckhand has now reportedly disappeared, even though Animals Australia has previously denied the payment. And Rick Wilson said that they, Animals Australia, groomed the deckhand. He said an email showed a worker suggested ventilation to the sheep could be closed in order to increase animal suffering. Now, the Australian Livestock Exporters Council has recently called for Animals Australia to disassociate themselves from the extremist Peter Singer, who was one of their founders and a founder of the Greens political party, due to his comments about bestiality on Twitter. Now, I'll remind you, Peter Singer was awarded Australia's highest honour. That's the AC. And while he's using his public profile to push the ethics of sexual contact with animals. This is simply outrageous. Joining me now is the CEO of the Australian Livestock Exporters Council, Mark Harvey-Sutton. Mark, thanks so much for your time. We've had two strong speeches by Western Australian politicians, Wilson and Brockman. What's the backstory to their parliamentary criticism?
Oh, thank you for having me tonight, Cory. Look, these were two incredibly important speeches made by Mr Wilson and Senator Brockman, and what they point to is the practice by Animals Australia of paying for footage of animal suffering. Now, we've always maintained that if payments are made for footage, that it actually creates an incentivisation. It creates a market for animal cruelty. It also points to Animals Australia's willingness to take advantage of people within our supply chains that may not be as fortunate as us, Cory, but they are very much willing to take advantage of them. And I think that really points to their ethical standards and how they approach things.
Yeah, it's incredible that they denied the payment, but it's been revealed that they did make it now. And what's maybe even worse is that the government relied on this outrageous conduct by Animals Australia to move against the live export industry. Tell me, what impact has that had on your members and overall on Australia's export activity?
Well, we're very fortunate that we are still trading, Cory. Industry recognised that it needed to reform. There were things we needed to do to make sure that we could ship sheep in particular to the Middle East safely and to the highest animal welfare standards. And those standards are being met now. And that has given us acceptance with the community. But unfortunately, this government is persisting with its policy to phase out live sheep exports. It is a policy that is not based on science, it is purely based on politics and an activist-driven agenda. And it's a policy that's doing irreparable harm to our sheep production industry here in Australia. Producers right across Australia are suffering at the moment because there's confidence has been withdrawn from the industry off the back of this policy. And producers, particularly in WA, are suffering because they are the main state that exports sheep to the Middle East. And we know that Western Australians support their farmers, and I don't think they'd be very happy that harm is being put upon their farmers at the moment.
Yeah, quite right. So you want the government to walk away from this, the phasing out of the live export industry. But you've also called for the government to walk away from any association with Animals Australia, and then for Animals Australia to walk away from any association with their founder, Peter Singer. I've gone through some of the reasons, but this is a bunch of extremists that have been legitimised, in my view.
Well, unfortunately, Cory, we're in the position at the moment where activist groups such as Animals Australia seem to have the wood on policy for agricultural animal welfare. They sit in a very privileged position with government. They are the driver of this policy. And farmers have been saying that this policy is wrong, but we're not being listened to. And then when you put on top these statements by Peter Singer that seem to endorse sexual contacts with animals, I mean, it's abhorrent. It does not meet the standards of community. It's disgusting. But no one is calling it out, Cory, which is really disappointing. And even today, if you have a look on the Animals Australia website, they promoted a talking tour from Peter Singer last year. And you can buy his book as a Christmas gift if you wish. So I think this association is not good enough and it does not meet our standards. And this is who the government's listening to.
I'm absolutely with you there. And I called him out many years ago. And of course, that cost me a parliamentary position, I think, at the time, because, you know, this is a natural extension. He wrote the book, the foreword for the book, Heavy Petting, which was endorsing the same thing. And then he was given an AC by Julia Gillard and her government. This is actually disgusting. The Greens should dump any association and disassociate themselves from him as well. But here's a question for you. Do you think Peter Singer should be handing back his AC for pushing such perverted ideas? They're just out of bounds, aren't they?
Well, it's not up to me to decide, Cory, but what I do think is the silence on this has just been deafening. I find it astonishing that no one is willing to call this out. We have called it out. My understanding of those awards, they're the highest award that you can give to an Australian, and it's for services to the community. But I don't think sexual contact with animals is actually to the standards that the community accepts. And I think they would be shocked by this. And I think people really need to start calling this out. This is very disappointing. And the government needs to actually listen to those within the agricultural industry. Because, Cory, I might add, no one has done more for animal welfare in the markets that we send our animals to than our industry. If we walk away from our industry sending livestock to the Middle East, it'll simply be filled by those that do not have as high standards as we do. And we have a commendable record in the Middle East around increasing those animal welfare standards. So they should start listening to the industry and not extremists.
Yeah, here. And if you won't do it, I'll say Peter Singer should give his AC back. And if not, they should take it away from him for such perverted and revolting ideas. Hey, thank you, Mark Harvey-Sutton. Merry Christmas to you. And I hope we get some policy traction to support your industry going forward.